Plattsburgh is in the national spotlight for a moratorium on cryptocurrency. You may have seen it on CBS News. Local media have covered it. Other towns are now following suit in the temporary moratoriums. What role should the federal government have in regulating mining the blockchain technology as it pertains to the concerns of local officials?
So 3 years ago, I was one of the few candidates in New York State to accept Bitcoin contributions. In this race, I'm one of the few candidates for the House of Representatives that accepts Bitcoin. It's one of the reasons why it's tremendously important to bring folks like myself that have technical training, I have a degree in biochemistry from RPI, to regulate and develop these new emerging technologies. Because it's impossible to develop the proper regulations for these technologies if you don't first understand how they operate. In regards to what's going on in Plattsburgh and elsewhere, we're seeing a disconnect from an old bulk purchasing electricity that has brought miners to the community and has now jacked up costs on the rest of the community because those quotas are being exhausted. We need to have a system that is fair to the communities, but we also need to have one that isn't restrictive of this new potentially transformational technology. It means we need to work in efficiency and figure out how to use the waste heat that mining generates productively. It means we need to invest in renewable energy generation for mining and for cryptocurrencies so that they're not using hardworking people's electricity throughout the district.
Mr. Radigan.
The whole idea of a currency is to represent the value of a society. It represents the value of what we produce, the value of our potential as human beings. The reason these cryptocurrencies even exist is because we so severely discredited and debased our own currency, the US dollar, especially in the bailout with the Federal Reserve about 10 years ago, that it created a sense that the integrity underneath our currency, the US dollar and the basic currency market, was not as sound as we'd hoped it was, which led to this idea of creating an invented currency that's backed exclusively by using electricity and doing math. I mean, people can say, listen, well, what's behind the US dollar? Well, at least the US dollar has the full faith and credit of the economy of the United States and our ability to pay our taxes. I'm not passing judgment one way or the other on Bitcoin per se, but it's time that we come back to understand where value resides in our society, which is how we actually create solutions for one another, and get away from the silliness of trying to invent bypass currencies because we don't like what happened with the Federal Reserve and we're simply looking to use up a bunch of electricity. I'm fully in favor of certainly managing the electricity use for the currencies.
Ms. Wilson?
So I feel like this is a topic that there's a lot of lack of understanding around it. It's very kind of highbrow. People don't even know what cryptocurrency and bit mining is. So I'm going to just kind of lay down the reasons why there's a moratorium going on in our local communities, and that's because there is a finite amount of energy from NYPA that we have access to living in municipalities at a reduced rate. When a company comes in and wants to mine for these cryptocurrencies, which takes an incredible amount of electricity, they eat that up at the expense of other local businesses who are creating many more jobs than a cryptocurrency mining operation creates, and also homes in the area. So when I look at this issue, and I think, you know, this is coming into our future. This is something we do have to prepare for. How can we create a scenario where it works? Well, what if we didn't allow them to get that cheap energy, which is why they're coming up here, because the electricity is so cheap, and instead made them pay full price, but then offered them tax incentives on the other side and use that excess heat to create large-scale greenhouses and channel this into something that's viable in the new economy?
Ms. Cobb?
Yeah, I'm going to answer this question from my experience as a legislator, and that is local governments can be integral. They should be leading the discussion about how their communities go forward. Because, and I've seen this happen with wind in the North Country, when the local community doesn't have a plan, then companies can come in and tear that community apart. So I think that local communities need to now have a discussion, whether it's the towns, the villages, the legislature, and they should develop their plans, and then when a company comes in, they are not torn apart. We can negotiate from a point of strength, but only when the community works together to create that plan. And so that's how I would propose that we move forward. And it's not just about cryptocurrency, but it's about any new development that happens. Our communities need, and we have a right to take the lead.
Thank you. Ms. Martz.
Cryptocurrency companies are predatory companies, and they look for small rural areas like ours to take advantage of. Quite often they're operating before we even know that they're there. That's what was happening in Plattsburgh. These are companies that pay few, if any, taxes. They create very few jobs, and the profits are not returned to our local communities. And we need in our district locally based companies that work with our communities that create jobs here where the money is spent here. And so what the federal government can do is to continue to provide the resources that I have worked with in my economic development career, so that when local communities create a vision and create an idea for a type of company that they want to have in their community, we have the investments available for them to be able to fund it.
And Mr. Nelson, a rebuttal.
When Charlie Klein sent that first message to Bill Duvall in 1969 along the ARPANET, I am not sure that they anticipated that we would be debating a cryptocurrency on a live stream going out to the internet all over the world. So it's more than just a currency. The currency aspect of it is one application that is running on a distributed, censorship-free, and independently verified democratic network. I'm not telling you what the applications will be that this will enable us to do. But if we call these companies predatory and we shut down the opportunities for innovation, other nations and other communities will benefit from this innovation and this economic development. So yes, local communities absolutely need to lead the way, and we shouldn't allow working families to be hurt with higher electricity costs. But we need to regulate this with a light touch and allow what is next to emerge with this new technology to emerge, because we very well may all benefit on it and someday even rely on it.
All right, rebuttals. Mr. Radigan first.
The thing that you have to understand, excuse me, is that you are in a situation where there are the principles of the blockchain, there are principles that are the principles Patrick is describing that are unrelated to the complete loss of sense of what value is and the lack of self-direction. If we do not decide for ourselves what really matters, whether it's the creation of jobs, the health care that we want, the defense of our environment, we are directionless and at the whim of whoever shows up to buy some electricity. That is not leadership, that is not politics. We must measure where we are, decide what really matters, and develop what we want, not respond to what others seek to exploit from us.
Ms. Martz.
We need to be calling these companies what they are, and they are predatory. And by doing that, we are doing other communities around the nation a favor. By having the summit that they had in Plattsburgh a couple of weeks ago, led by the local leaders, we are doing other rural American communities a favor by letting them know ahead of time, watch out. These companies do you a grave disservice. They may be there and you don't even know it, so keep a watch out. So we absolutely need to be calling them predatory.
Thank you. Ms. Wilson,
Well,
at the wire.
since we're talking about it, why should we be reacting out of fear instead of using this as an opportunity to innovate? I mean, when we think about what the potential could be for companies like this company, and I have a lot of friends who agree with Emily and who think that they're incredibly predatory and we should keep them out and lock them up. But what if we had these large-scale greenhouses? What if we were able to feed our own area from within? What if we were using that extra energy to create a ton of jobs? What if we have an opportunity to turn this into something great as opposed to being afraid of something new?
Mr. Radigan.
I admire your creativity. As you know, I started a solar-powered hydroponic greenhouse business about 5 years ago, and have done a lot of work in Canada looking to harvest waste heat as well as waste CO2 from cogeneration plants. There is some benefit to it, and it is a viable idea in certain situations. But to take something that is not creating value, but which is harvesting electricity, and to try to make the best of a bad situation is better than not doing it. But why choose that path when you can define what really matters and get what you want for your community?
And Let's go first to Ms. Martz. Did you want to, you're up, Ms. Wilson.
I'm going to keep playing because there are new ways to do things. So what if, I mean, again, you're being fearful. You know, you're saying, you know, they're bad, they're harvesting energy from our communities, but we have the wind and the sun ahead of us. You know, we could power the entire eastern seaboard with offshore wind. This is the future. This is what China and the UK are doing. And we have an opportunity now to store energy. We could be creating tax policies that actually offer an opportunity to store energy and therefore create an opportunity to really make this work.
All right, gentlemen, we need to wrap it up. Let's make final points and then we'll move on. Mr. Nelson?
The communities that recognize the opportunity that these new technologies allow for and do it right. And so I'm not saying that they should be able to get cheap electricity out from the hands of working people in this district. But with the right touch, with the right ideas, kind of like what Katie is talking about, the communities that get this right will become what Wall Street was to finance and what Silicon Valley is to the internet. They can become for cryptocurrency and this new market. And in an area that needs jobs and economic development, we should not pass that opportunity by.
All right, final points, Mr. Radigan, then Ms. Martz. Mr. Radigan?
That's objectively false. They don't create jobs and the money leaves the district. Our country and our district is able to do so much better than to create jobs doing math on a computer for a made-up currency. The opportunity to actually care for each other in our health system, in our educational system, in our local food systems. Yes, we want those greenhouses, but we don't have to attach them to these types of things. It's not that it's inherently a bad idea, it's that our capability to actually get what we want is not something we should be afraid to ask for.
And Ms. Martz, 30 seconds.
I applaud Plattsburgh for standing up as an advocate for their region, for their town. That is what they were doing at the summit, is standing up and saying, no, you're not going to take advantage of our community like this. And all too often, we've seen it from big oil companies, we've seen it from wind turbine companies, come in, take advantage of our rural areas, and then leave us with the mess. That is what Plattsburgh was doing, and that is what I applaud them for.
You are focusing heavily on what it is today and not focusing on what it can become someday. When you start with emerging technologies, you can create a critical mass where people are involved in new ideas and new technologies. So it's not just about what it is today, it's about what it has the potential to become, and don't kill the potential just because there's struggling right now.